Yo, what is up, guys? It's coming back here again today with another video, another recap of the NBA games from today. I'm kind of trying to come up with a name for these videos other than just calling them recap videos. If you have an idea, let me know in the comment section below, and if yours gets chosen, I'll shout you out on here. So if you have any ideas, please let me know down below. I've been trying to brainstorm some stuff. I do have some ideas, but nothing concrete yet, so please let me know. But I wanted to start with the Los Angeles Clippers game. Now, they beat the Houston Rockets tonight, which isn't a huge accomplishment. A lot of teams have beat the Houston Rockets this NBA season, being the worst team in the NBA. But the fact is that the Clippers, not just in this game, but over the course of the last 10, 11 games, have been rolling. They've been on fire. And no one is really talking about the Los Angeles Clippers, which is really weird to me. Last season, the Los Angeles Clippers were the story of the NBA with the Los Angeles Lakers. It was those two teams. People really didn't care about what was happening out east, like most of the season. Like the Bucks were a really good story. Giannis was stepping up. This was their chance to prove to Giannis that he should stay in Milwaukee, and they were having one of their best seasons ever. Unfortunately, that did come to an end, at least unfortunately for them. Fortunate if you're a Heat fan, in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, but the main story of the NBA was, oh, we're going to see this Clippers Lakers Western Conference Finals. That's going to be like kind of the real finals to a lot of people, at least in the national media. That's what they're looking forward to. LeBron James and Anthony Davis versus Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. That was the matchup everyone was looking forward to, and it never happened. Now, the Lakers, they held up their end of the bargain, but the Clippers couldn't get it done, losing to the Nuggets in 7 games in the second round, blowing a 3-1 series lead. And since that point, the Clippers have not gotten nearly as much attention. Now, I know, blowing a 3-1 lead is pretty bad. I've been there before, trust me. But at the same time, this Clippers team is really good. They're better than they were last season, especially offensively. This Clippers team feels like they are doing so much better on the offensive side of the ball, and I think a lot of that does come from Tyronn Lue, who is known to be a good offensive coach. He came in, he kind of switched up the systems, and he breathed new air into this team. It feels like they're more cohesive as a group. Last season, they never really had that championship feel to them. This season, they do have that kind of feel. And yet they're getting way less media attention. I don't know if that's still a hangover from the fact that they lost that series against the Nuggets and now people really aren't catching up to the hype. Maybe it's also because of the Suns and the Jazz, who are stepping up and playing incredible basketball, and therefore they are at the top of the Western Conference, not like a Lakers Clippers type thing. It's not those two teams up there, both of them dealing with injuries throughout the season. It is the Suns and the Jazz, who are two teams I see people talk about a lot, which is cool to see. I love when people talk about small market teams. As a fan of a small market team, of course, it's really cool for me to be able to see that, and I hope that someday people are talking as highly about my team as they are talking about the Suns and the Jazz. And I do think the Suns and the Jazz do have the potential to make and win the NBA Finals. They're up there in the Western Conference for a reason. It's a really tough conference. But the Clippers are being forgotten in this conversation. I feel like a lot of times when people talk about it, it was the Suns, Jazz, people are like, oh, they could potentially do things. The Lakers are probably still the favorite, given that they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis when they do get healthy. And then like the Nuggets, people talked about a decent bit before Jamal Murray got hurt. Now, I'm not sure if that's so clear. They are still playing well, although they got 21 balled tonight by the Golden State Warriors with Will Barton leaving the game early. He said that his hamstring was hurting him. He said it made a popping noise, so hopefully he's okay and it's nothing too serious, because this Nuggets team is really ravaged right now. But the Clippers, like I said, not really talked about. And they're really, really good. I can talk all day about how good Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are, but particularly I want to look at a little bit of Paul George. Now, he was the guy that in the playoffs last season, he was the guy who really didn't play very well. Now, Kawhi Leonard also had his moments where he needed to step up more, but Paul George really let the Clippers down a lot in last season's playoffs. And they didn't care. They said, oh, well, obviously they cared, but they said in the offseason, all right, we believe in you. We think that was an anomaly, and we think you're going to turn around. And they gave him a 4-year extension. He signed this massive contract with the Clippers to commit to them, and they said, you are going to be one of, if not the star of the Los Angeles Clippers, depending on if Kawhi Leonard stays or leaves, which it sounds like he's leaning towards staying. Depending on if he leaves or not, Paul George could be like the sole star of the Los Angeles Clippers. They said, we're okay with that. You're our guy. We want you here. And I think that's a great show from the organization. And Paul George has rewarded them for it. He's played incredible this season, started as an MVP candidate, and now he's kind of playing back up to that role because Kawhi Leonard has missed a bunch of time as of recently. And we're not really sure when Kawhi Leonard is going to be healthy enough to be consistently in this rotation. He might honestly just rest up until the playoffs, which is something that Kawhi Leonard really does a lot of the time. We'll see if that is the case. But for right now, it's Paul George's load to bear. And he's doing great. And not even him. The supporting cast is really stepping up. Marcus Morris, Luke Kennard had a great game the other night. I think it was 28 points. He's had some good games over the course of the season. Rajon Rondo, give him credit. I thought it was a bad trade to give up Lou Williams, and Rondo's been great. I seemingly was wrong. I fell for it again. Shout out to Rondo for proving me wrong. I love when players prove me wrong. He's been really good for them. They've been missing Serge Ibaka a lot as well recently, Patrick Beverley, and yet they've won 10 of their last 11, and they're not even healthy. So when they're healthy, this Clippers team is terrifying, or it should be terrifying for the rest of the Western Conference. They can lock you up, they can score a lot of points, and they're much deeper than they were last season. And I think that's going to be big for them. I think this Clippers team is way better than last season's team, and people need to not forget about them when it comes to the playoff race. They're way under the radar right now, which I think is exactly where they need to be. Last season, I think it got to the Clippers' head a little bit. It felt like they were doing all this talk about winning the championship, which obviously all teams think that they're going to or hope to do. But they were talking about like, oh, what they were going to wear at their championship parade, how they were going to beat the Lakers, how they were talking like, oh, sending other teams to Cancun and stuff like that. They were talking a lot of trash for a team that had really not ever won anything, especially as a group. It was their first season together. And this franchise has never even been to like a conference finals. So why are they talking all this smack? And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I feel like people went at the Clippers last season. They were like, these guys are obnoxious and they're talking a lot of smack for a team that hasn't won anything, and people went at them. And ultimately, I think they got in over their head. I think they looked too forward to the future, especially going up 3-1 against a team you never expect to blow that lead if you're an NBA player. And they blew it. Blew it to Denver Nuggets, a team that was hungry and that wanted to beat them and didn't have that cockiness. Now I think the Clippers are knocked down a peg. Do they still have kind of an edge to them? Yeah, definitely. They have a lot of sharp personalities in a Marcus Morris, a Patrick Beverley, guys like that. Rajon Rondo, guys who like to get up in people's faces and annoy you and butt heads with other players. So they're always going to have that annoying identity. But I think it's much more balanced now. I think now, like, they've kind of been like, okay, we had these issues, we need to work them out, and I think they've kind of worked them out a little bit. So, that all being said, the Clippers can win the championship. They absolutely can. And I think they're flying way too under the radar for people. I can't remember the last time that people have talked about the Los Angeles Clippers, and also with me, I feel like I haven't talked about the Clippers that much on this channel, which is crazy because they are a championship contender. I talk about the Jazz, I talk about the Suns, I talk about the Lakers. Given I haven't talked about the Lakers in a while because LeBron and Anthony Davis have been out. I'm sure a video is going to be coming on them soon, next time they have a big performance. But overall, do not sleep in the Los Angeles Clippers. Don't be someone who's caught way off guard. Now, I know, like I said, Paul George is a guy who people have memed him to death in becoming a bad playoff player. He's had some great playoff performances in the past. Now, has he also had his low moments? Absolutely. We saw that last season. I saw that a couple times at OKC, I'm not going to lie. But he's also had some great moments way back with the Pacers. Fantastic moments. And I think he still has that in him. And I think this season he seems healthier, he seems more confident, and he has that security of that contract. He's not terrified to play on a contract and be afraid that the team is just going to let him go, or that he's going to have to find a new situation and where he loses stability. So ultimately, I think this Clippers team is much better than last season. I think that they have a chance to win the championship. And no, this isn't all coming from tonight's game against the Houston Rockets, although another good performance from the Los Angeles Clippers. Paul George had 33 points and 14 rebounds tonight. I think this is the year he really shows up in the playoffs. If I get this wrong, if he chokes in the playoffs, you can drop this video clip at me. Someone record it right now, and you can quote me on this. But I think this is the year Paul George has a great playoff performance, and I think ultimately the Clippers are going to end up in the Western Conference Finals. Is that crazy to say? I don't think it's crazy to say. Maybe they won't. It's nothing certain, but they've got a lot of potential too. So don't forget about the Los Angeles Clippers when you're thinking about NBA contenders. All right, that's all I wanted to say about the Clippers. Outside of that, I don't even think I'm going to talk about the Thunder game, really. Darius Bazley is on a tear right now. Shout out to him. He deserves a lot of credit. Russell Westbrook balling out, trying to make a case for that All-NBA team. The Wizards have now won 7 or 8 in a row, one of those two numbers. I can't remember if it was 7 before the game or after the game, but either way, Wizards playing really, really well right now. Russell Westbrook is a monster. Like I said, trying to make an All-NBA case. We'll see if he's able to make it. There's a lot of good guards, so it's going to be tough for him, but would love to see him make it. Next, what other games do I want to talk about here? I guess I'll talk about the Hawks-Heat game. The Heat are disappointing. The Heat might miss the playoffs. That's weird to say for a team that didn't have many significant changes now, given they have dealt with a lot of injuries this season. But this Heat team shouldn't be as disappointing as they have been. They have the talent, they have the coaching. They just don't have that same fire to them, which is weird to say about a Heat team, especially a Jimmy Butler-led team. Those teams are always hyper-competitive. Now, like I said, Jimmy Butler has missed a bunch of time. But this team just feels, Jimmy Butler says this a lot, and he says that they're soft. I don't know if they're necessarily soft, but like I said, they don't have that same edge to them. Last season, it felt like they were like the anti-Clippers. We just talked about the Clippers being super cocky. The Heat were like, we know we're the underdogs. We know people aren't expecting us to make the finals. We're going to do it anyways. We're going to go in. We're going to beat up the Bucks that everyone thinks is this powerhouse team. We're going to beat them. We're going to go up and beat the Celtics. We're going to go up against the LeBron James-led Lakers, and we're going to try and beat them. Fell short there, but played really, really hard, brought them to 6 games. So this Heat team just doesn't feel like they have that same edge. I don't know what it is. I think losing Jay Crowder was a big piece of this team. Tyler Hero, in a more expanded role, has not really lived up to the hype that he established for himself last season. I think people put way too much hype on him. Other guys included like Jamal Murray, I think got too much, like people put a little too much expectation on them. You can't put way too, like, these insane lofty expectations on someone and then be disappointed when they don't meet those crazy expectations. Tyler Hero is still a really promising young player. He's just super young. He's going to develop into that talent that a lot of people see him as eventually being. It's just going to take some time. So you got to be patient with these guys. On the Hawks side of the ball, the Hawks are rolling. They've been really good since Nate McMillan showed up, and they beat the Heat by 15 points today without Trae Young. No Trae Young, no Clint Capella, and they won by 15 points, and the Heat were relatively healthy. So that just really shows you the mentality of the Hawks team. It's like next man up. They've been missing DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish a lot of the season, and they're still in the, I believe they're the 6th seed right now in the Eastern Conference. It changes pretty much every day. I'm pretty sure it's still the 6th seed. That's impressive, and if they're able to stay healthy and get healthy, this Hawks team is going to cause problems. I'm really curious to see how I'm excited to watch every single playoff series this season, especially over there in that Eastern Conference. I think there's going to be some incredible matchups in that Eastern Conference. Even though you have those powerhouses, the Bucks, the Sixers, and the Nets, there are teams down there that could give those teams problems. If the Heat get like an 8 or like a 7 seed or even a 6 seed and have that matchup again with the Bucks, that is going to be really, really fun. So I'm excited to see what ends up happening. I'm really excited for the play-in tournament. I think this was a perfect season in terms of competitiveness for it to happen, because I think we're going to have some really good games coming out of it. So shout out to the Hawks for rolling. The Heat got to pick it up. I'm not going to talk about Cavs Hornets too much. I will shout out Miles Bridges. He's having an incredible season, and he is very underrated. And especially, people don't talk about him enough in terms of his potential and the Hornets' young core as a whole. Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, Devontae Graham, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, all pretty productive players. Malik Monk been stepping up this season. There's a lot of talent, young talent there, and I think the Hornets are way ahead of schedule for what a lot of people expected. You throw in a Gordon Hayward, if they could get like a really good center, I think this team is like getting up there in talent. In just like a season or two, this Hornets team could be incredible. They could be super competitive. I was tweeting about this the other day. Like them, the Hawks, the Knicks, maybe even the Bulls if they're able to get things together. There's a lot of really up-and-coming East teams, and I think the East is going to slowly start to become a really competitive conference, similar to the way that the West has been for the last few years, where every team feels like a powerhouse. I think that's the way the Eastern Conference is kind of moving, and I'm really excited to see it because it makes for a better basketball product, is the word I'm going for there. So, yeah, outside of that, Nuggets Warriors, like I said, was a blowout. Curry was dealing with some foot issues throughout the start of the game. He ended up kind of figuring it out a little bit. I think he said he didn't really like the tape job that they did on his ankle, so hopefully Curry is okay. Will Barton, like I said, felt a pop in his hamstring, so hopefully he's all right. But big win for the Warriors. The Warriors trying to keep pace in that play-in tournament, especially with the Grizzlies getting a massive win over the Portland Trailblazers today, which I'll talk about in a second because I love Jaren Jackson Jr. and I want to talk about him. But the Nuggets, it hurts because this team is really talented, and I really thought they had a chance to win the West this year. But without Jamal Murray, and if Will Barton is gone too, this Nuggets team's kind of cooked. And it sucks, but unfortunately, it's just the way the season has gone. I might make a video talking about all the injuries this season because they're kind of getting out of control. Let me know if you want to see that. Grizzlies Trailblazers. I think this is going to be the last game I talk about. I could talk about Celtics Nets a little bit. I'll talk about Celtics Nets like real quick before I get into the Grizzlies game. The Celtics, this is a game that they were missing Jaylen Brown. They're missing Robert Williams. They're missing Kemba Walker. The Nets are missing Kevin Durant and James Harden. So I really don't think this game says much about either team. I think this could have gone either way. The Nets role players just seem to be more on tonight. They hit more threes. Yeah, Jason Tatum was really in his bag tonight. Unfortunately, that was kind of tainted by the fact that he missed 2 late game free throws to really not cost the Celtics this game. If he wasn't there, the Celtics aren't even in this game. but it kind of made it really difficult for them down the stretch to kind of find that success that they needed to win the game. And ultimately, Kyrie Irving and Landry Shamet iced the game at the free throw line. It happens. I don't think this game says a lot about either team, though. Although the Nets, shorthanded, take the first seed in the Eastern Conference. We'll see if Philly's able to take it back tomorrow. Playing the Bucks, actually. That's going to be a really good one. I'll definitely talk about that game. And finally, Grizzlies Trailblazers. Jaren Jackson Jr. is really good. And he is the needle mover for this Grizzlies team. Every team has like a guy or two that really move the needle for you. Jonas Valanciunas is really critical to this Grizzlies team, and so is John Morant. But Jaren Jackson Jr. is the X factor because we haven't seen him all season. Not at all. A funny thing is, I think I heard there was someone when they were talking about, I forget which game it was. I was watching one of the games, and the announcers talked about how Jaren Jackson Jr. returned. And they were like, oh, he's been really underappreciated this season. Like, this wasn't his second game being played. I can't remember who it was, but whoever it was, shout out to you. The Grizzlies Blazers. This one was right down to the wire. Damian Lillard tried to it looked like it was a purposely missed free throw. I think he tried to miss it on purpose with the chance to put the game within 1 point. And he missed it on purpose, and they couldn't get the rebound. Game was just ice. They ran out of time there. Big game from John Morant, 30 points. I think it was 13 assists. Good shooting on like 60% shooting. Ja's been stepping up, and I think the game is going to get a lot easier for him now that Jaren Jackson Jr. is back. He is the X factor. He has not played all season, and the Grizzlies have still been afloat. With the defense he brings, the three-point shooting he brings, and he's not even hitting his threes at a great rate, and he's still affecting the game a ton. He blocks shots. It looks like he grew even. He looks like he's 7'1" now. Jaren Jackson Jr. is really tall. And between the defense, the spacing, alongside Jonas Valanciunas, a guy who can play solid defense and also space the floor, it's going to give John Morant a lot more options on offense to kick the ball out to guys when he drives in, and it's going to make his game a lot more effective. I think this is where Ja is going to get unlocked. I think he's been kind of having a down season compared to what people thought he was going to produce. A lot of people thought he was going to be an all-star this season. Once again, people putting like really lofty expectations on young players, but people thought he was going to be an all-star, and ultimately it just did not end up happening. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that he hasn't had Jaren Jackson Jr. alongside him. Triple J really helps him out. I cannot overstate how excited I am for him to be back. The Grizzlies have a chance to go in and take that 6th seed. They really do. I think they have a pretty easy schedule coming up, and with Jaren Jackson Jr. back and Jonas Valanciunas trying to get healthy, if they have those 3 guys in the lineup, you put Kyle Anderson, who's been a super underrated player. Kyle Anderson is super underrated. He's a really good role player. I think it's because he moves in slow motion, but put him in there. You put in solid players like Desmond Bane, Xavier Tillman, Grayson Allen, DeAnthony Melton. You have a really solid team, and the Grizzlies are going to have a fun matchup, whoever they face in round 1, because I do think this Grizzlies team will end up making the playoffs. I think they're going to win in the play-in tournament. Whether they end up as like the 7 seed or the 8 seed, I think that might be the position they end up in. We'll see if they do end up taking that 6 seed. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but it would be cool to see. So the Blazers side of the ball, they got to get this done. They have to be better. After tonight, they fell out of the 6 seed. I think the Mavericks now have it down to the 7 seed. You don't want to be in that play-in tournament. You don't, especially with a defense this bad. I know you have Damian Lillard, but if you're in that play-in tournament and you have to face like a Steph Curry, that's terrifying if you're the Blazers. Because if this Blazers team misses the playoffs, I can't overstate how massive of a disappointment that'll be. I know guys have missed time, but they're healthy now, and you have to win these games. They did not come out and win tonight, and it cost them a spot in the playoffs potentially. So with that being said, that's all the games for tonight. Let me know what you thought of these games. Let me know what you think about the Los Angeles Clippers. Can they win a championship, or do you think I'm kind of overselling it a little bit? What do you think about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s return for the Grizzlies? I think it's phenomenal. Let me know what you think. And yeah, once again, if you have an idea for what these videos should be called, let me know, because I kind of want to name them. So I will see you guys later. Real one, say it back.